It stands alone on the Giza Plateau, the most iconic structure ever built, the Great Pyramid, a silhouette burned into human consciousness, inseparable from the story of ancient Egypt. We're told it represents the pinnacle of 4th dynasty engineering, a tomb for Pharaoh Khufu constructed over 20 years using organized labor and precise astronomical knowledge. But the Great Pyramid is not alone. Across oceans, through millennia, the same shape rises again and again. In Mesopotamia, ziggurats climb toward the heavens in stepped platforms. In Mesoamerica, the Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan mirrors the same vertical ambition. Along the Nile in Nubia, smaller pyramids mark royal tombs in the kingdom of Kush. In China, near the ancient city of Xi'an, burial mounds take the unmistakable form of pyramids, hidden beneath centuries of vegetation. These cultures never contacted each other. They spoke different languages, worshipped different gods, developed under entirely different environmental pressures. Yet, they built monuments that share something fundamental: square bases, cardinal orientation, monumental scale, a narrowing ascent toward the sky. The obvious explanation is stability. A pyramid is the most stable way to build tall, using primitive tools and heavy materials. Gravity does the rest. Case closed. But stability explains survival, not obsession. Why the astronomical precision? Why the ritual pathways carved into stone? Why build far larger than necessary, consuming generations of labor for structures that served no immediate practical purpose? Why does this design appear not gradually but suddenly? Fully formed at the dawn of organized societies, pyramids are more than engineering solutions. They are statements. Across the ancient world, they carry the same symbolic weight. Artificial mountains, cosmic centers, places where Earth meets sky. They anchor human life to celestial cycles. They mark power, permanence, and the boundary between mortal and eternal. This isn't a story about secret contact or lost super-civilizations. There's no evidence for that. This is a story about pattern, about a design that keeps reappearing whenever humans reach a certain threshold of organization, belief, and cosmic awareness. Tonight, we're going to trace that pattern through 10 specific claims, each one built on artifacts, texts, and measurements, each one presenting evidence that is too organized to be myth, too strange to be history. We cannot confirm the implications. We cannot dismiss them either. We can only follow where the record leads. If you enjoy exploring historical patterns hidden in plain sight, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. As always, the visuals are here to add context, but they aren't necessary to follow along. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. You're about to explore one of history's most overlooked mysteries. Not how pyramids were built, but why they keep being built, and why the pattern refuses to break. Let's begin with the foundation, with Egypt, with what should be the most documented structure in human history. The Great Pyramid at Giza is the most studied monument on Earth. Thousands of academic papers, dozens of excavation seasons, endless documentary speculation. And yet, for all that attention, we possess no contemporary account of its construction. Not one. No papyrus describes the method. No inscription on the pyramid itself details the process. No 4th dynasty text explains how approximately 2.3 million stone blocks, each averaging 2.5 tons, were quarried, transported, and assembled into a structure rising 481 feet, with tolerances measured in fractions of an inch. The oldest references we have are the pyramid texts, inscribed in the pyramid of Unas at Saqqara. These texts appear roughly 200 years after Khufu's death. They are religious in nature, spells for the afterlife, cosmic journeys, solar hymns. They mention pyramids as sacred spaces, but they contain no technical information, no measurements, no workforce organization, no logistics. This is the anomaly, the absence itself. Consider what we do have from ancient Egypt. Construction records exist for temples, obelisks, and smaller tombs. The Harris Papyrus catalogues materials used in Ramesses III's building projects with bureaucratic precision. Ration lists survive from the workers' village at Deir el-Medina, detailing beer allocations and grain distributions. Egypt was an administrative civilization. It recorded everything: grain harvests, tax receipts, military campaigns, quarry operations. The archaeological record is dense with ledgers, inventories, and official correspondence. So why is the Great Pyramid, the most ambitious project in Egyptian history, absent from that record? The standard explanation is straightforward. The records existed but were lost. Papyrus degrades. Stone inscriptions erode. 4.5 millennia is a long time. Perhaps the construction archive was housed in a structure that didn't survive. Perhaps it was written on materials that decayed completely. Perhaps it was never inscribed in stone because the knowledge was oral, passed directly from master builders to apprentices in a tradition that left no textual trace. But here's where the explanation falters. We have construction records from other 4th Dynasty projects. The Palermo stone, a fragmentary annal, records the names of ships built during Sneferu's reign, Khufu's father. It lists the dimensions of those ships. It catalogs the materials used. We know about quarrying operations at Aswan because workers left graffiti marking their crews. We know about copper tool production because we found the workshops. The 4th Dynasty wasn't pre-literate. It wasn't administratively primitive. It was organized, methodical, and deeply invested in recording state achievements. So the absence becomes more pointed. Why would the greatest engineering triumph of the dynasty leave no administrative trace? Why would smaller projects be catalogued while this one remains silent? One possibility sits at the edge of the evidence. What if the Great Pyramid wasn't an invention but an inheritance? What if the knowledge required to build it predated Khufu's reign, making the construction less a pioneering feat and more an execution of an existing blueprint? In that case, records might detail the labor and materials, the logistics of execution, but not the origin of the design. The design would already be known, already established, already part of institutional memory so deep it required no explanation. The text does not confirm this, but it does not dismiss it either. The administrative silence surrounding the Great Pyramid becomes more unsettling when compared to Mesopotamia, where obsessive record-keeping was not just a practice, but a cultural imperative. And there, in the cradle of writing itself, we find the same pattern. Detailed execution records. No origin story. In the British Museum, catalogue number BM 113203, there's a clay tablet from the city of Ur. It dates to approximately 2100 BC, during the reign of Ur-Nammu, founder of the 3rd Dynasty of Ur. The tablet is an administrative document. It lists rations distributed to workers engaged in the construction of the great ziggurat of Ur. The entries are meticulous. quantities of barley, allocations of beer, daily bread distributions, the number of workers per shift, the overseers responsible for each crew. The tablet tells us exactly how many men labored on which day, what they were fed, and who supervised them. What it does not tell us is why a ziggurat, why this form, why stepped platforms rising in receding tiers toward a temple summit, why the massive scale, the precise orientation, the specific geometric proportions. The tablet records execution. It does not explain intent. And this is the pattern across Mesopotamian ziggurat construction. We have hundreds of administrative tablets from Ur, Uruk, Babylon, and other city-states. They catalog brick production, bitumen shipments, labor rotations, and ceremonial dedications. The Mesopotamians were perhaps the most bureaucratic civilization of the ancient world. Cuneiform script was invented specifically to manage economic transactions. Temple archives overflow with ledgers. Yet, for all this administrative density, there is no text that says, "We are building ziggurats because," followed by an explanation of the design's origin or purpose beyond the formulaic "a house for the god," or "a mountain for heaven." The first true ziggurats appear suddenly in the Uruk period, around 3000 BC. They are not crude prototypes. They are sophisticated structures. The White Temple at Uruk sits atop a massive platform, already demonstrating the characteristic step descent. There is no archaeological evidence of gradual development from simpler forms. No experimental stages. No trial structures that show a culture figuring out how to build vertically in monumental fashion. The ziggurat emerges fully formed. The mainstream explanation is that ziggurats evolved from earlier temple platforms. Mesopotamian temples were often built on raised foundations to lift them above the floodplains. Over time, the reasoning goes, these platforms grew taller and more elaborate, eventually becoming ziggurats. Cultural memory of sacred mountains from the ancestral homeland in the Zagros region may have influenced the design, creating an artificial peak in the flat river valleys of Sumer. But the archaeological gap is real. Between the simple platforms of the Ubaid period and the first ziggurats of Uruk, there is a leap in scale, complexity, and geometric precision that doesn't suggest incremental evolution. It suggests implementation, the execution of a concept already mature, and the administrative tablets reinforce this. They show a civilization that documents everything with obsessive care: ration lists, brick counts, dedication rituals, but never the why, never the origin of the form itself. The design is treated as a given, as something already known, already part of the institutional blueprint. Consider the implications. Egypt and Mesopotamia are the two earliest literate state-level civilizations in the ancient world. Both develop monumental architecture. Both choose variations of the same geometric form, a massive base narrowing toward the sky. Both execute these designs with precision. Both leave detailed records of the labor involved, and both are silent on the question of where the design came from. Silence in one case might be accident. Silence in two suggests something else. It suggests that the design was so embedded in the organizational logic of these societies that it didn't require explanation. It was simply what one built when certain thresholds of population, labor organization, and cosmic orientation were reached. The pyramid, in its stepped or smooth-sided form, was not invented. It was deployed. The text cannot confirm this. The record does not permit certainty. But the pattern is there, documented in administrative precision and bureaucratic silence, too organized to be myth, too strange to be dismissed as coincidence. And then, millennia later, across an ocean that should have been an impassable barrier, the same form rises again, not approximately, not loosely similar, identical in ways that defy easy explanation. Which brings us to Mesoamerica and an alignment that should not exist. The Pyramid of the Sun stands in the ancient city of Teotihuacan, roughly 30 miles northeast of modern Mexico City. It was constructed during the early centuries of the Common Era, with most estimates placing primary construction between 100 and 150 AD. By that time, the Great Pyramid at Giza had already stood for approximately 2,600 years. The Mediterranean world had risen and fallen through Bronze Age collapse, classical Greece, and the expansion of Rome. Egypt itself had passed through the Middle Kingdom, the New Kingdom, foreign domination, and Ptolemaic rule. And across the Atlantic Ocean, Mesoamerican civilizations developed in complete isolation from the Old World. No contact, no transmission, no shared knowledge base. Yet the Pyramid of the Sun and the Great Pyramid share a specific architectural characteristic that goes beyond general resemblance. Both structures are oriented with intentional deviation from true north. The Great Pyramid at Giza is aligned 3 arc minutes west of true north. The Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan is oriented approximately 15.5 degrees east of astronomical north. These are not random errors. They are deliberate choices, confirmed by the precision of the construction and the consistency of the alignment across the broader site layouts. Here is where the pattern becomes difficult to dismiss. The deviation at Teotihuacan is not arbitrary. It aligns the pyramid with the setting point of the Pleiades star cluster on the date of its zenith passage over the site. This is sophisticated astronomical observation translated into monumental architecture. The deviation at Giza has been interpreted variously as aligning with specific stellar positions at the time of construction, though scholarly consensus on the exact astronomical target remains debated. What is not debated is that both deviations are intentional, measured, and astronomically meaningful. So we have two cultures, separated by an ocean and more than 2 millennia, both choosing to deviate from true cardinal north in order to embed astronomical alignment into their largest pyramidal structures. The alignment serves no structural purpose. It does not make the building more stable. It does not simplify construction. It requires additional effort, careful astronomical observation, precise surveying, and the organizational capacity to enforce that precision across a massive workforce over an extended construction period. The mainstream explanation is convergent evolution. Humans everywhere observe the sky. Civilizations that develop calendrical systems and agricultural cycles naturally become astronomically sophisticated. When they build monumental architecture, they incorporate that astronomical knowledge. The pyramidal form itself is stable and impressive, so multiple cultures arrive at it independently. The astronomical alignments are products of local observation and local religious or calendrical priorities. There is no mystery, only parallel development, driven by similar environmental and cognitive pressures. But convergent evolution explains similarity. it does not easily explain specificity. If astronomical alignment were a general human impulse, we would expect to see varied approaches. Some cultures aligning to solstices, others to equinoxes, others to prominent stars, others to lunar cycles. We would expect alignments to reflect local cosmological priorities, producing a diversity of orientations and deviations. Instead, we see repeated selection of the same geometric form, the pyramid, combined with repeated emphasis on precise cardinal or near-cardinal orientation, with deviations that serve astronomical rather than structural purposes. The specificity tightens further when we consider scale. The Pyramid of the Sun is massive. Its base measures approximately 730 feet by 760 feet. Its height originally reached about 216 feet. In terms of volume, it is one of the largest pyramids ever constructed, comparable in bulk to the Great Pyramid itself, though lower in height. This is not a modest structure built by a small community experimenting with monumental form. This is a civilization-scale project requiring vast labor coordination, resource extraction, and multi-generational organizational continuity. And it appears like the ziggurats of Mesopotamia and the pyramids of Egypt, without clear antecedents. Earlier, Mesoamerican cultures built platforms and mounds, but the leap to the Pyramid of the Sun is not incremental. It is sudden. It is fully realized. The design does not fumble. It executes. The text does not permit us to claim shared knowledge. There is no archaeological evidence of transoceanic contact between Mesoamerica and the Old World during the relevant periods. Genetic, linguistic, and material culture studies consistently support the isolation model. The ancestors of Mesoamerican civilizations arrived via the Bering Land Bridge and developed independently. This is well established, but the architectural record presents a pattern that isolation does not easily explain. Not similarity. Similarity can be coincidence, specificity, the same form, the same scale threshold, the same astronomical integration, the same organizational demand, executed with precision, repeated across cultures that should have no knowledge of each other, cannot confirm transmission, cannot dismiss the pattern. The record states what it states. The measurements are exact. The alignments are deliberate. The silence on origin persists, and when we turn south along the Nile, the pattern does not weaken. It intensifies. In what is now northern Sudan, near the modern town of Begravia, there is a pyramid field. It is known as the Royal Cemetery of Meroe, and it contains over 40 pyramids. These are not the pyramids of Egypt's Old Kingdom. They are smaller, steeper, and stylistically distinct, but they are unmistakably pyramids. Square bases, smooth or stepped sides, pointed summits, cardinal orientation. They served as royal tombs for the rulers of the kingdom of Kush, a Nubian civilization that flourished along the Nile south of Egypt from approximately 800 BC to 350 AD. Here is the temporal problem. The last major pyramid constructed in Egypt proper dates to the Middle Kingdom, around 1700 BC. After that, Egyptian pharaohs largely abandoned pyramid construction in favor of rock-cut tombs in the Valley of the Kings and other necropolises. There is a gap, a silence in the pyramid-building tradition lasting over a millennium. Then, around 300 BC, the Kushite rulers begin constructing pyramids at Meroe. These pyramids continue to be built until approximately 300 AD. That is 2,000 years after the Great Pyramid, 600 years after Egypt itself stopped building them. And yet the form persists. The standard explanation is cultural continuity. Kush was deeply influenced by Egypt. Kushite rulers adopted Egyptian religious practices, burial customs, and artistic styles. At certain points in history, Kushite pharaohs even ruled Egypt itself, forming the 25th dynasty. The pyramid, as a symbol of royal power and eternal life, was a part of that cultural inheritance. When Kushite rulers wanted to express their legitimacy and divine authority, they drew on Egyptian models, including the pyramid. This explanation accounts for the persistence of the form. It does not account for the precision of the execution. The Meroe pyramids are not crude imitations. They are technically accomplished. The angles are consistent. The alignments are accurate. The construction methods demonstrate mastery of stone cutting, corbelling, and structural engineering. These are not the products of a culture vaguely imitating a half-remembered design. They are the products of a culture with active, unbroken institutional knowledge of pyramid construction. And yet, there is a gap. A documented, archaeologically confirmed gap in pyramid building activity. Egypt stopped. Kush continued or restarted. But the technical quality suggests continuity, not rediscovery. One possibility is that the knowledge never left the region. While Egypt's royal pyramid tradition ended, the skilled labor class, the engineers, masons, and overseers, did not disappear. They worked on other projects: temples, fortifications, irrigation systems. The organizational blueprint for large-scale monumental construction remained embedded in institutional memory, in guild traditions, in training systems passed from master to apprentice. When Kushite rulers decided to build pyramids, the knowledge was available, not because it was rediscovered, but because it had never truly been lost. It had simply shifted south, maintained in a different political context. The administrative records from Meroe are limited. The Meroitic script has been partially deciphered, but much remains unclear. We have royal names, dedicatory inscriptions, some religious texts, but we do not have construction archives. We do not have ration lists or labor rosters or logistical tablets equivalent to those from Ur or the workers' villages of Egypt. The bureaucratic density that might clarify the knowledge transmission is absent, so we are left with the structures themselves. And the structures are consistent, too consistent for accidental revival, too precise for cultural imitation without technical foundation. The Meroe pyramids are smaller than Giza, but they maintain the same geometric logic. They demonstrate the same concern with orientation, the same attention to funerary ritual pathways, the same integration of architecture and cosmology. This is not a culture guessing at what a pyramid should be. This is a culture executing a known form with technical confidence. And the temporal gap raises the question: if pyramid construction can pause for a millennium and then resume with undiminished precision, what does that say about the nature of the knowledge itself? Is it something that can be mothballed and reactivated? Is it embedded so deeply in institutional structures that even political collapse and dynastic change cannot erase it? Or is the knowledge itself simpler than we assume? Not a fragile secret requiring continuous practice, but a robust blueprint that any sufficiently organized civilization can implement when it reaches the necessary threshold of scale and centralization? The record cannot answer. It can only document what happened. Pyramids stopped. Pyramids resumed. Quality remained high. The form persisted across a gap that should have broken the chain, cannot confirm unbroken transmission, cannot dismiss institutional memory. The pattern holds. And when we cross continents again, to the burial mounds of ancient China, we find the same geometric insistence embedded in administrative planning, recorded in units of measurement that assume the pyramid form as the natural expression of monumental power. In the Wei River Valley, near the modern city of Xi'an, there are over 40 large earthen mounds. They dot the landscape in clusters, concentrated around the ancient capital region of the Han dynasty. For centuries, these mounds were assumed to be natural hills, obscured by erosion, vegetation, and the passage of 2 millennia. But aerial surveys conducted in the 20th century revealed something else. The mounds are geometric. They have flat tops, sloping sides, and square or rectangular bases. They are aligned with cardinal directions. They are burial mounds for emperors, nobles, and high-ranking officials. And they are pyramids. The largest of these is the mausoleum of Emperor Jingdi, constructed around 150 BC during the Han dynasty. Ground-penetrating surveys and limited excavations have confirmed a step pyramid structure beneath centuries of accumulated soil. The base measures approximately 160 meters on each side. The original height is estimated at 30 meters or more. The structure was not built of stone, but of rammed earth, layers of compacted soil creating a solid, monumental core. Here is what makes this significant. Chinese burial records from the Han period describe these mounds in bureaucratic detail. Imperial edicts specified the dimensions of burial mounds for different ranks. Nobles were permitted mounds of a certain size. Emperors received larger ones. The measurements were standardized, recorded in Elia units, and enforced as part of sumptuary law, regulations governing who could consume, display, or construct what based on social rank. The records describe these structures as ling or zhong, terms that translate loosely as mound or tumulus. But the dimensions given in the records, when converted to modern measurements, consistently yield proportions that match pyramid geometries, base-to-height ratios, slope angles, square bases with receding tiers or smooth sides. The administrative texts do not call them pyramids. The term had no equivalent in classical Chinese architectural vocabulary, but they describe pyramids nonetheless. And the records state something else. They describe some of these mounds as ancient even then. The Shiji, or Records of the Grand Historian, compiled by Sima Qian around 100 BC, references burial mounds of earlier dynasties and legendary rulers, some of which are described as having existed for centuries before the Han. The text does not explain their origin. It treats them as established forms, inherited from a past already distant. The mainstream explanation is that these are natural developments of earlier burial practices. Chinese Neolithic cultures built earthen burial mounds. Over time, as state power centralized and resources increased, these mounds grew larger and more geometrically regular. The pyramid shape is a result of structural logic. Rammed earth naturally takes a sloped form to prevent collapse, and a square base with receding tiers is the most stable way to build tall with that material. The standardization reflects bureaucratic efficiency, not mysterious transmission. It is simply what happens when a centralized state regulates monumental construction. But satellite surveys and ground studies reveal geometric precision that exceeds structural necessity. The Han pyramids are not haphazard earthworks. They are carefully aligned. The slopes are consistent across multiple structures. The cardinal orientations are deliberate. Some mounds show evidence of exterior cladding, bricks or stones that once covered the rammed earth core, creating smooth sides rather than stepped platforms. The construction involved surveying, planning, and quality control mechanisms sophisticated enough to enforce standardization across decades of building activity and multiple dynastic reigns. And the temporal problem mirrors what we've seen elsewhere. The pyramid form appears suddenly in monumental scale. Earlier burial mounds exist, but they are smaller and less geometrically refined. The leap from Neolithic burial mound to Han imperial pyramid is not gradual. It is abrupt. And once established, the form is replicated with bureaucratic consistency. The administrative records catalog everything: the amount of labor required, the tribute sent from provinces to fund construction, the rituals performed at completion, but they do not explain the design itself. It is treated as given, as something already known. The bureaucracy manages execution. It does not question origin, cannot confirm where the form came from, cannot dismiss the precision of its implementation. The geometry is there, recorded in measurements, enforced by law, executed across generations, too organized to be accidental, too consistent to be improvised. And the consistency does not stop at geometry. It extends to something deeper, to orientation, to an obsession with cardinal alignment that appears across every pyramid-building culture, enforced with a precision that exceeds practical necessity. In 1973, a comparative study published in the Journal of Archaeological Survey, International, analyzed slope angles across 87 major pyramidal structures from Egypt, Mesopotamia, Mesoamerica, and Nubia. The study measured the angle of inclination, the slope of the pyramid's face relative to the ground. The researchers were testing a hypothesis about structural optimization. If pyramids converged on similar forms, purely for stability, slope angles should cluster around the range dictated by material properties and gravitational constraints. The results showed clustering, but not in the range expected. The average slope angle across all measured pyramids was 51.8 degrees. The Great Pyramid at Giza has a slope of approximately 51.8 degrees. The Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan, depending on reconstruction estimates, slopes between 50 and 52 degrees. The Meroe pyramids average 52 degrees. Ziggurats, with their stepped construction, do not have a single continuous slope. But the outer faces of individual tiers often fall within the same range. Structural engineers confirm that pyramids can be built with stable slopes anywhere between 40 and 60 degrees. Steeper slopes conserve material but increase internal stress. Shallower slopes are more stable but require more material and a larger footprint. The optimal angle depends on material properties, foundation conditions, and construction technology. There is no single correct angle. There is a range. And yet, across vastly different materials, cut limestone in Egypt, mud brick in Mesopotamia, rammed earth in China, basalt and adobe in Mesoamerica, cultures consistently chose angles within a narrow 2-degree band centered on approximately 52 degrees. The mainstream explanation is that this represents a convergent recognition of an ideal balance. Cultures experimented with different slopes and, through trial and error, arrived at the same conclusion. 52 degrees is the sweet spot. Steep enough to be visually impressive, shallow enough to be structurally sound. The convergence reflects universal engineering logic, not shared knowledge. But trial and error should produce variation. If each culture independently experimented, we would expect to see outliers, failed experiments, pyramids built too steep that collapsed or required reinforcement, pyramids built too shallow that seemed squat or wasteful. We would expect a learning curve, a progression from crude early attempts to refined later structures. We would expect regional differences based on local materials. Limestone behaves differently than mud brick. Rammed earth has different compressive properties than basalt. Optimal angles should vary accordingly. Instead, we see consistency from the beginning. The earliest large pyramids already hit the 52-degree mark. Sneferu's Red Pyramid, built before Khufu's Great Pyramid, has a slope of 43 degrees, but this is explained by historical context. Sneferu's earlier bent pyramid began at 54 degrees, then shifted mid-construction to 43 degrees, likely due to structural concerns during building. The final choice for subsequent pyramids settled back into the 51 to 52 degree range. This suggests learning, but also that the target angle was known, deviated from under duress, and then reinstated. In Mesoamerica, there's no evidence of experimental slopes. The major pyramids are built at approximately 50 to 52 degrees from the outset. In Nubia, the steeper Meroe pyramids average 52 degrees with remarkable consistency. The Chinese earthen pyramids, when reconstructed from their eroded forms, fall into the same range. The pattern suggests not discovery, but application, not experimentation, but execution of a known parameter. The slope angle appears to be part of a design template that cultures implement when they build pyramids, regardless of material, geography, or structural necessity. And the template extends beyond slope. It extends to orientation, to an insistence on cardinal alignment that cannot be explained by structural logic at all. The Great Pyramid at Giza is aligned to true north, with an error margin of approximately 3 arc-minutes, 1/20th of a single degree. This precision, achieved without magnetic compasses or modern surveying instruments, required careful astronomical observation. Likely methods include tracking the rising and setting points of stars, observing the circumpolar star's rotation around the north celestial pole, or using shadow-casting techniques during solar noon. Whatever the method, the result is undeniable. The pyramid's sides are oriented almost perfectly to the 4 cardinal directions. This is not unique to Giza. The second and third pyramids on the Giza Plateau, Khafra's and Menkaura's, show the same precision. The Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan, despite its intentional 15.5-degree deviation from true north, maintains that deviation consistently, meaning it is just as precisely aligned to its chosen orientation as Giza is to true north. The ziggurats of Mesopotamia align to cardinal directions with errors typically less than 2 degrees. The Han Dynasty pyramids in China align with similar precision. In 1973, the same survey that analyzed slope angles examined cardinal alignment across major pyramidal structures. The findings, 87% of pyramids measured showed alignment within 3 degrees of true cardinal directions. This is not approximate. This is deliberate. The mainstream explanation is straightforward. Astronomical observation for calendrical purposes was a priority for early civilizations. Agriculture depends on predicting seasonal cycles. Religious rituals are timed to celestial events. Observing the sun, moon, and stars provided the data needed for calendar systems. Once, a culture had the capacity to track celestial movements. Incorporating that knowledge into monumental architecture was a natural step. Aligning a pyramid to the cardinal directions demonstrated astronomical competence, reinforced cosmic order, and symbolized the ruler's connection to the heavens. But astronomical competence does not require cardinal alignment. Many ancient structures are astronomically significant without being cardinally aligned. Stonehenge is oriented to the solstices, not the cardinal points. The Newgrange Passage tomb in Ireland aligns to the winter solstice sunrise. Numerous Mesoamerican structures align to specific dates in the 260-day ritual calendar, or to the sun's zenith passage. These cultures clearly possessed astronomical knowledge, yet they did not prioritize cardinal alignment. And some cultures that had more advanced astronomy than the pyramid builders did not align their monuments cardinally at all. The Babylonians developed sophisticated mathematical astronomy, tracking planetary movements and predicting eclipses. Yet, their ziggurats, while generally aligned, show more variation in orientation than Egyptian or Mesoamerican pyramids. Greek temples are often aligned to local topography or specific celestial events, not uniformly to the cardinal directions. So the question is not whether pyramid-building cultures could align to the cardinals. Clearly, they could. The question is why they prioritized it so consistently when other options existed, and other equally sophisticated cultures did not. Cardinal alignment serves no structural function. It does not make a pyramid more stable. It does not simplify construction. In fact, it adds complexity. Achieving 3 arc-minute precision requires repeated observations, careful surveying, and quality control throughout the building process. The workforce must maintain the alignment as construction progresses, adjusting for accumulated error. This takes time, expertise, and organizational discipline. And yet, across cultures separated by oceans and millennia, this precision is enforced, not loosely, not approximately, consistently, within margins of error that suggest the alignment itself was a non-negotiable parameter of the design. The record does not explain why. Egyptian texts do not say pyramids must align north-south. Mesopotamian tablets do not catalog the ritual significance of cardinal orientation in ziggurat construction. Mesoamerican codices reference astronomical events, but do not specify alignment requirements. Chinese administrative records regulate burial mound dimensions, but are silent on orientation. The alignment is embedded in the execution. It is assumed. It is part of the template. And when we examine ritual infrastructure, the pathways, causeways, and processional routes built into pyramid complexes, the template reveals another layer, not just alignment to cardinal directions, but alignment to the sun's path. East-west orientation, repeated across cultures, with identical architectural solutions to the same ritual function. The Great Pyramid at Giza is connected to a structure called the Valley Temple by a long, narrow causeway. This causeway runs approximately 800 meters, oriented east to west. It was originally enclosed, roofed, and walled, creating a covered processional corridor. The causeway connected the pyramid, where the pharaoh's body was entombed, to the valley below, where rituals of purification and preparation would have taken place before the final ascent. The orientation is deliberate. East-west follows the sun's daily path across the sky, from rising to setting, mirroring the journey from life to death to rebirth in Egyptian cosmology. This is not unique to Giza. Khafre's pyramid has a similar causeway. Menkaur's complex includes one as well. Across multiple pyramid sites in Egypt, the pattern repeats: pyramid to the west, valley temple to the east, causeway linking them along an east-west axis aligned with the solar path. Now consider the ziggurat of Ur. The structure itself rises in 3 massive tiers, topped by a temple dedicated to the moon god Nana. Access to the ziggurat is via monumental staircases. One central staircase ascends the southeastern face. 2 flanking staircases curve upward along the sides. But the approach to the ziggurat complex itself follows a specific path. Pilgrims and priests entered from the east, passed through a series of courtyards and gates, and ascended toward the temple in the west. The processional route is oriented east to west, following the movement of the sun. In Teotihuacan, the Pyramid of the Sun is part of a larger urban layout structured around the Avenue of the Dead, a massive north-south boulevard. But the pyramid itself has an east-facing entrance. Ritual processions would have approached from the east, ascending toward the summit where a temple once stood. The orientation again mirrors solar movement. East is the direction of sunrise, renewal, and beginning. West is the direction of sunset, completion, and the underworld. 3 cultures, 3 continents, 3 separate religious systems. Egyptian solar theology centered on Ra and the journey through the underworld. Mesopotamian cosmology focused on planetary gods and the cycles of the moon. Mesoamerican religion integrated solar deities, agricultural cycles, and the 260-day sacred calendar. These systems are not the same. They do not worship the same gods. They do not share the same myths. And yet, when they build pyramids, they build the same ritual infrastructure. East-west orientation. Processional pathways aligned to the sun's movement. Temples or tombs positioned to mark the transition from earthly to celestial, from mortal to eternal. The mainstream explanation is that solar worship is universal. The sun is the most obvious celestial object. It governs day and night, seasons, agricultural cycles. Every agricultural society watches the sun. Most develop some form of solar veneration. When they build monumental architecture, they naturally incorporate solar symbolism. East-west orientation is the simplest way to mark that symbolism architecturally. It requires no shared knowledge, only shared observation of the same sky. But solar worship takes countless forms. Some cultures build circular monuments like Stonehenge to mark solstices. Some carve sun symbols into rock faces. Some construct temples that flood with light at specific moments of the year, like Abu Simbel in Egypt or the Newgrange Passage tomb in Ireland. Some orient temples to the equinoxes, others to solstices, others to the zenith passage of the sun in tropical latitudes. Solar reverence does not demand a specific architectural solution. Yet pyramid-building cultures choose the same solution. Not circular monuments, not light and shadow effects, not solstice markers, processional causeways. east-west orientation. Access from the east, ascent toward the west. Summit temple marking the culmination of the solar journey. The ritual infrastructure is architecturally identical, despite the religious differences. This goes beyond symbolic convergence. Symbolism can be expressed in infinite ways, but the architectural implementation is specific. The causeway is not just a path. It is a covered, enclosed corridor in Egypt. It is a raised platform in Mesopotamia. It is a monumental avenue in Mesoamerica. The details vary. The underlying pattern does not. East-west, processional, solar-aligned, built into the pyramid complex as integral infrastructure, not afterthought. And this infrastructure appears at the same time as the pyramids themselves. It is not added later. It is not a refinement introduced after generations of pyramid building. It is present from the beginning. The causeway at Giza is contemporary with the pyramid. The processional staircases at Ur are part of the original ziggurat design. The Avenue of the Dead at Teotihuacan is integral to the city's layout. The ritual pathway is embedded in the blueprint. The record does not tell us why. Egyptian texts describe rituals performed in temples, but do not explain why causeways must run east-west. Mesopotamian inscriptions dedicate ziggurats to gods, but do not specify the orientation of access routes. Mesoamerican iconography depicts solar deities, but does not mandate processional architecture. The infrastructure is built. It is used. It is replicated. But it is not explained. It is treated as obvious, as part of what a pyramid complex is, as something that does not require justification, cannot confirm shared ritual protocol, cannot dismiss architectural identity. The pathways are there, documented, measured, aligned, too specific to be coincidence, too consistent to be independent invention without an underlying template. And the template itself carries a requirement, not just geometric, not just astronomical, organizational. Pyramid building does not begin in small communities. It begins only when certain thresholds are crossed: population, centralization, bureaucratic capacity. And those thresholds are consistent across every culture that built them. No pyramid appears in the archaeological record of a society with a population below approximately 50,000. This is not a hard rule encoded in ancient texts. It is a pattern derived from comparative archaeology. When we examine the earliest pyramid-building cultures, Old Kingdom Egypt, early dynastic Mesopotamia, Teotihuacan-era Mesoamerica, Han Dynasty China, each had reached a minimum population threshold before pyramid construction began. More specifically, pyramid construction correlates with state formation. It appears when a society has developed centralized authority, surplus agricultural production, specialized labor and administrative infrastructure, capable of mobilizing and sustaining large workforces over extended periods. These are the markers of a state-level society, as opposed to chiefdoms, tribal confederations, or smaller agricultural communities. Old Kingdom Egypt during the Fourth Dynasty had a population estimated between 1 and 2 million. The city-states of Sumer during the early dynastic period each supported tens of thousands of inhabitants, with the broader Mesopotamian population in the hundreds of thousands. Teotihuacan at its height housed between 100,000 and 200,000 people. The Han Dynasty governed a population in the tens of millions, though pyramid construction was concentrated in the imperial heartland, where the administrative center controlled labor from across the empire. The pattern is clear. Pyramids appear only when populations and organizational capacity reach a certain scale. Below that scale, monumental architecture takes other forms: earthworks, megaliths, temples, fortifications, but not pyramids. The mainstream explanation is straightforward. Pyramids are labor-intensive. Building one requires thousands of workers coordinated over years or decades. It requires surplus food to feed those workers. It requires engineering expertise to design the structure. It requires administrative capacity to manage logistics, quarrying stone, transporting materials, organizing shifts, distributing rations, maintaining quality control. Only a state-level society can marshal those resources. The pyramid is therefore a natural expression of state power. When a society reaches the necessary organizational threshold, pyramid construction becomes possible. Some societies choose to build them, others do not. But the option only exists once the scale is sufficient. But here is the problem. Many large-scale societies never built pyramids. Classical Greece had city-states with populations in the tens of thousands, and regional populations in the hundreds of thousands. They built temples, theaters, and monumental city walls, but no pyramids. The Roman Empire governed tens of millions. It built aqueducts, amphitheaters, roads, and triumphal arches, but no pyramids. The Indus Valley civilization supported urban populations larger than contemporary Mesopotamia. It built planned cities with sophisticated drainage systems, but no pyramids. The Inca Empire, despite building extensive stone architecture and organizing massive labor corvées, constructed platforms and temples, not true pyramids in the Egyptian or Mesoamerican sense. So, organizational capacity is necessary, but not sufficient. Reaching 50,000 population and state-level complexity does not automatically produce pyramids. It makes them possible. But whether a culture builds them depends on something else, something that varies. And yet, the cultures that do build pyramids build them the same way, not loosely similar, specifically similar, same geometric form, same astronomical alignment, same ritual infrastructure, same organizational pattern. This suggests that the pyramid is not just a monument. It is a technology, not in the physical sense, stone cutting, ramp construction, surveying, but in the organizational sense. It is a blueprint for channeling surplus labor, demonstrating state power, integrating cosmological knowledge into material form, and marking the boundary between the mortal ruler and the eternal cosmos. It is a solution to a specific set of problems that arise when societies reach a certain threshold of scale, centralization, and ideological complexity. And the solution, once implemented, is replicated with precision. The variation is in materials and stylistic details. The core template remains constant: square base, cardinal orientation, monumental scale, astronomical integration, ritual pathways, a narrowing ascent toward the sky. The record shows that pyramid construction begins when societies reach organizational maturity. It shows that the form, once adopted, is executed with consistent precision. It shows that cultures separated by oceans and millennia arrive at the same architectural solution to the same set of political, cosmological, and organizational demands. Cannot confirm a shared origin of the blueprint, cannot dismiss the consistency of its implementation. Too organized to be independent invention, too specific to be convergent evolution, The pattern is documented. The threshold is real. The template is consistent. And then, in every pyramid-building culture, the same thing happens. Construction stops. Centuries pass. And then, inexplicably, it restarts with the same precision, the same knowledge, the same organizational capacity, as if the blueprint was never lost at all. In Egypt, the last major pyramid of the Old Kingdom was built during the 6th dynasty, around 2200 BC. After that, political collapse. The first intermediate period brought fragmentation, regional warlords, and the breakdown of centralized authority. Pyramid construction stopped. For over 1,000 years, Egypt did not build pyramids. Then, during the Middle Kingdom, around 2000 BC, pyramid construction resumed. The pyramids of the 12th dynasty, such as those at Dashur and Hawara, are smaller than their Old Kingdom predecessors. But they demonstrate sophisticated construction techniques, internal corridors, hidden chambers, structural innovations designed to thwart tomb robbers. These are not the products of a culture fumbling to remember how pyramids work. These are the products of a culture that retained technical knowledge through a millennium-long gap in construction. In Mesopotamia, ziggurat construction flourished during the early dynastic and Ur-III periods, roughly 3000 to 2000 BC. Then political upheaval, the fall of Ur, the rise and fall of competing city-states. Ziggurat construction declined, but during the Neo-Babylonian period around 600 BC, 800 years later, King Nebuchadnezzar II rebuilt the ziggurat of Etemenanke in Babylon. The structure, famously associated with the Tower of Babel, was reconstructed with technical precision matching or exceeding earlier ziggurats. The knowledge had survived the gap. In Mesoamerica, the Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan was constructed around 100 to 150 AD. Teotihuacan collapsed around 600 AD. Pyramid construction in central Mexico paused. Then, centuries later, the Aztecs built the Templo Mayor in Tenochtitlan, beginning around 1325 AD, a gap of over 700 years. Yet the Templo Mayor is a sophisticated twin pyramid complex with precise astronomical alignments and complex internal construction. The knowledge persisted. The standard explanation is that pyramid construction knowledge was never truly lost. It was encoded in multiple forms. Written records, though fragmentary. Guild traditions among stonemasons and engineers. Oral transmission within priesthoods. Observation of existing structures, which remained visible and could be studied. When political stability returned and centralized states re-emerged, the knowledge was reactivated. Pyramid construction resumed because the institutional memory had survived, even if dormant. But institutional memory is fragile. Building a pyramid requires more than remembering that pyramids exist. It requires surveying techniques to establish cardinal alignment within arc minutes. It requires quarrying knowledge, how to split stone, transport multi-ton blocks, shape them to fit without mortar. It requires structural engineering, understanding load distribution, preventing collapse, managing internal chambers. It requires labor organization, feeding thousands of workers, maintaining quality control, coordinating logistics over years. This is not abstract knowledge. This is practical, hands-on expertise, the kind that degrades without continuous practice. And yet, the revivals show no signs of degradation. Middle Kingdom pyramids are not crude approximations of Old Kingdom designs. They are technically refined, incorporating lessons learned from earlier collapses and incorporating new innovations. Neo-Babylonian ziggurats are not inferior to their Ur-3rd predecessors. They are executed with equal or greater precision. The Aztec Templo Mayor is not a rediscovery struggling to replicate Teotihuacan. It is a confident, sophisticated structure built by a culture that knew exactly what it was doing. How does technical knowledge survive centuries of non-use? If pyramid construction stopped because the political structures that enabled it collapsed, how did the expertise survive the collapse? If skilled laborers were no longer building pyramids, where did the knowledge go? And when construction resumed, who trained the new generation of engineers and masons? One possibility is that the knowledge was never specific to pyramids. It was embedded in broader architectural and engineering traditions. The skills required to build a pyramid, stone cutting, surveying, labor organization, are the same skills required to build temples, fortifications, irrigation systems, and other monumental projects. Civilizations did not stop building during the gaps. They simply built other things. The expertise remained active in different contexts. When the decision was made to build a pyramid again, the knowledge was available because the underlying skills had never atrophied. But this does not explain the precision of the revivals. If pyramid-specific knowledge was dormant while general construction knowledge remained active, we would expect the revivals to show experimentation, trial and error, adjustments as builders reacquired pyramid-specific expertise. Instead, we see immediate competence. The first Middle Kingdom pyramids are sophisticated. The ziggurat of Etemenanke is executed with confidence. The Templo Mayor does not fumble. The alternative is that the knowledge was more robust than we assume. Not fragile expertise requiring continuous practice, but a codified blueprint that could be shelved and reactivated. A set of instructions, whether written, oral, or embedded in observational study of existing structures, detailed enough that a sufficiently organized civilization could implement it even after centuries of dormancy. The record cannot confirm either explanation. We do not have the construction manuals. We do not have the training records. We have the structures. And the structures show gaps in construction, but no gaps in competence. Pyramid building stops. Political systems collapse. Centuries pass. Pyramid building resumes. Precision remains high. Knowledge survives silence. Cannot confirm unbroken transmission. Cannot dismiss institutional resilience. The pattern is documented. The gaps are real. The revivals are precise. Too organized to be myth. Too strange to be dismissed. The record states what it states. And what it states is that the pyramid, once learned, is never truly forgotten. Across 5 continents and 4 millennia, the pyramid rises. Egypt, Mesopotamia, Mesoamerica, Nubia, China. Cultures that never met. Languages that never mixed. Gods that never shared temples. And yet the form persists. Square bases, cardinal alignment, slope angles within 2 degrees of 52, processional causeways oriented east-west, monumental scale appearing only when populations exceed 50,000 and state-level organization emerges, astronomical precision woven into orientation, ritual pathways embedded in design, construction knowledge that survives centuries-long gaps and resumes with undiminished competence. We know certain things. We know these cultures developed independently. Genetic, linguistic, and material evidence confirms isolation. We know they observed the same sky and faced similar organizational challenges when populations centralized and surplus labor became available. We know the pyramid is a stable form, well suited to monumental construction with pre-industrial tools. But we also know the specificity exceeds what convergent evolution predicts. Convergence explains similarity. It does not explain identity. Cultures converging on vertical monumentality could build in countless ways: towers, obelisks, ziggurats with different proportions, platforms with different slopes, circular mounds, rectangular temples. The range of stable, impressive forms is vast. Yet pyramid-building cultures choose the same narrow parameters, the same slope, the same orientation, the same ritual infrastructure, the same organizational threshold. We know the administrative records are dense with detail about execution, but silent on origin. Egyptian texts catalog workers and rations, but do not explain the pyramid's design. Mesopotamian tablets list bricks and bitumen, but do not justify the ziggurat's form. Chinese records regulate mound dimensions, but assume the pyramid geometry without comment. The design is treated as given, as something already known. We know the gaps in construction do not produce gaps in competence. Pyramid building pauses for centuries and resumes with precision intact. This suggests knowledge more robust than fragile oral tradition or continuous practice. It suggests either codified blueprints that survive dormancy, or expertise so deeply embedded in institutional structures that political collapse cannot erase it. What we cannot know is where the template came from, whether it was invented once and transmitted through mechanisms invisible to archaeology, or invented independently by every culture that reached the necessary threshold, following identical logic to identical conclusions. The evidence supports isolation. The pattern supports commonality. Both cannot be easily reconciled. The record remains silent on the question that matters most. Not how pyramids were built. We understand ramps, levers, and labor organization well enough. Not even why they were built. We understand power, cosmology, and the projection of eternal authority. The question is why the pattern is so consistent. Why every pyramid-building culture implements the same template with the same precision, at the same organizational threshold using the same astronomical and ritual logic. Too organized to be myth, too strange to be history. The pyramid stands at the boundary, a form that should be simple, but reveals complexity the deeper we look. A pattern that should be explicable, but resists final resolution, cannot confirm shared origin, cannot dismiss architectural identity. The structures are there. The measurements are exact. The alignments are deliberate. The gaps are documented. The revivals are precise. The silence persists. The pattern is real. What it means remains unresolved. Let it rest in your mind, not as an answer, but as a question that survives scrutiny. The pyramid rises across distance and time, the same shape against different skies, burned into human consciousness, inseparable from the story of civilization itself. Wherever you are tonight, whatever time it is, the pattern holds.